Another spirit is being made.
That's it. Another spirit is being made. Gary,
know.
what is going on?
Welcome, everybody. And, welcome to Splintered Spirits, the podcast hosted by me, Gary, and my nephew, John Santa from Santa Paranormal, where we try to answer the question, what are spirits? By exploring all types of spirit communication, theories, and beliefs. And really the goal here is, as you know, John, is we're trying to see how these different theories and beliefs fit into your theory of what spirits are. And spirits, as you know, or as if you're new to the podcast, you'll know that John believes spirits are the fractured memories of the living that somehow get attached to the energy dispersed from our bodies when we pass. Did I get that right?
Pretty much.
I pretty much got it down, I think. I
pretty much got it down.
I think I know how to sell it. John, today we got a really special guest. Today we're taking another step forward on this journey with one of the most prolific voices in paranormal research, Sam Baltrusis. Sam is the author of 18 books on ghosts, hauntings, and historic spirits, including Ghosts of Salem, Haunted Boston Harbor, and Ghosts of the American Revolution. He's been featured on some of the most chilling shows in the genre: The Curse of Lizzie Borden, A Haunting, Most Terrifying Places, Haunted Towns, Paranormal Night Shift, History's Most Haunted, and Fright Club with the Ghost Brothers and Jack Osborne. A historian by training and a clairvoyant by nature, Sam blends meticulous research with firsthand spiritual encounters. He's taught spirit communication across the country, spoken at paranormal conferences and libraries nationwide, and even appeared in the acclaimed documentary, The House in Between 2. Whether he's tracing ancestral hauntings or channeling overlooked spirits from the past, Sam's work goes beyond ghost stories. It's about giving voice to those long silenced, which is something you like to do when you go to these cemeteries and try to hear what they have to say and document. And today that voice brings us to one of America's most iconic haunted landscapes, Sleepy Hollow. This is a regular haunt for many spirits, legends, lore, and even our own John Santa. His latest book, Ghosts of Sleepy Hollow, explores the real stories behind the legend, the energy that lingers in the shadows of the Hudson Valley, and why this sleepy little town may be one of the most spiritually charged places in the country. And guys, I will have a link to this book in my bio where you will be able to see it. Ladies and gentlemen, we want to welcome Sam to the podcast. Can you hear us okay, Sam?
Yeah, I can hear you guys. Can you hear me?
I can. We're all
You're
good.
loud and clear, Sam. Thank you for joining us today.
I'm really grateful to be here. So yeah, when you described your take on spirits, we're very similar actually. Yeah. So I'm excited to talk about what your theory is and what my theory is. We can maybe work together on that.
Oh, well, this is great, Sam, because the first question I always have for any of our guests is this very thing. Sam, what do you think spirits are and what happens when we die?
Yeah, so I always say a ghost is history demanding to be remembered. So my approach really with spirits, it's not disembodied souls. However, as a medium, as a clairvoyant, I have encountered that, but my experience has been more of a psychic imprint of soul fragments. So if there was a trauma at a location, it's going to psychically imprint itself on the land. And when you talked about splintered spirits, I'm like, that's exactly what I think as well. And that's actually more of a shamanic approach to the paranormal. So, and part of my job as someone that works as a clairvoyant is to tell their story so we can do what's called soul retrieval and to bring those pieces together to make a whole.
You're gonna have to forgive me because I'm a big noob. When you use the word clairvoyant, is that separate from medium, or is it a faction of a medium, or is it a medium?
So clairvoyant is just an umbrella term for seeing. So okay. I actually see spirits, but it does shift for me. So I go from seeing spirits to a claircognizant, which is actually just knowing stuff, and then also there's different clairs. So a clairvoyant for me is kind of like my primary clair, and so that is clear seeing. But what's different with a clairvoyance versus clairaudience? Clairaudience is you actually get messages in your ear. So sometimes it's like playing charades with a ghost.
Gotcha. Sam, how did you know? Like, when was when did you first realize you had this clairvoyant ability? What happened?
So my whole story, it starts when I was younger. My dad was in the Navy. I grew up in Florida. So Florida, Chicago. My parents divorced, and I moved back to Florida after the divorce. I started having experiences going back to my granddaddy's home in Florida, and he actually passed, and I would have conversations with him. And it turns out I was sleeping in the room that he slept in
How
at
old
his
were you?
house.
How old were you?
Oh, I was like 6 to 8. So
Wow.
that whole period was sort of my experience with spirits and communicating with my granddaddy. But then it started getting darker really quick. I had a visitation when I was around 8 years old. What looked like a man wearing a hat with red glowing eyes. My sister was in the room with me, and that scarred me for many years, to the point where I was terrified of the spirit realm and communicating with ghosts. I worked as a journalist for about 20 years until I sort of started writing paranormal themed books. And then that's when the doors reopened for me, and I started re-examining my gifts and my abilities, and I've worked that muscle to the point where now I actually teach. I have a group called Spirit Squad, and we actually I work with up and coming mediums so they won't make the mistakes that I've made in the past.
First of all, you have every right to be terrified. If I saw something with red glowing eyes as a child, that would change probably the course of my life in a giant way as well.
What he's describing is a very common dark manifestation. Many people have that top hat manifestation, including my own mother and your sister.
That's true.
So that must have been terrifying for you.
Yeah, so the man with the hat, and we can't say Hat Man because that's actually trademarked, but
Is it trademarked?
Is it really?
Wow.
it is.
That's funny.
But yeah, so I always have interpreted it as it's not the same manifestation that everybody else is seeing.
Okay.
I strongly feel, and this is after years of like trying to communicate with it and understanding like what it's trying to tell me. It's more of a watcher. It appears before something bad is about to happen. So when my biological father passed away, I saw him again as an adult. When my stepfather passed, I saw him as well. So he's almost become like a harbinger for me. And I mean, I've been told by other mediums that he's with me, unfortunately, a lot. So he kind of like looks out for me. So I actually view him as a family member, but that's not my first impression. I was terrified as a kid. As an adult, I've seen him again, but I also have maybe more of a empathy toward him compared to what I did when I was younger.
Do you find, with this history that of how it started in Florida and now being a part of New England, is there a change in any sort of like that sort of spirituality or what you're finding in spirits as you move, or is the backdrop different? Was the openness in Florida different than in New England, or was it all just part of the same
Well,
growth?
well, my part of Florida was the Bible Belt portion, so it's called Pensacola, Florida, and it's right
Sure.
by Alabama.
Yeah.
And so I grew up with that. My gifts were from the devil, and in fact, my whole family were kind of similar in a sense that they had gifts as well, and they tried to hide it because of the region. So when I went to New England, it was almost like a liberation. I felt like I was surrounded by history, and I've always been kind of called to New England. So I went to college in the 90s and out of the blue, it was almost like I was called to go there. And it turns out years later, after my mother did research, that we have ties to New England. So I think, and getting back to even the man with the hat, I strongly feel that he's a family member from New England, actually, because he's wearing a pilgrim hat. And there's
They're the
something
worst.
about him that is not the typical manifestation that everybody else sees. I feel like it's my personal hat man.
Sure. Yeah.
Personal hat man.
Yeah, those repressed
I like it.
pilgrims. I can see why they're so upset with everybody, by the way, when they come through.
Sam, when's the last time you saw the man with the red eyes and the hat?
Yeah, so he actually appeared right before. So I had a situation that kind of ties into Ghosts of Sleepy Hollow. I was doing one last story, which is the Bronze Lady of Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. Going there's a whole legend that if you piss her off, then she'll do something like like drop a tree on your Camaro, which was, something that happened in the 70s to this lady. But my friend April and I went to the cemetery, and so we were taking selfies, and my friend April's from Jersey. So she was like, Sam, and we're taking photos. And I'm like, April, you can't disrespect the bronze lady. And she's like, oh, she thought it was hocus pocus. I thought it was hocus pocus, just urban legend. And then stuff like, so I dropped rose quartz, because I carry rocks with me when I go on investigations. And I thought I dropped my rose quartz. So I pick it up from the ground, thinking that it was mine, but actually wasn't mine. And then for a whole month, I had visitations, like a woman screaming, and things associated with what I think was the bronze lady. So we apparently pissed off the bronze lady. And so I, about a month later, I was about to get to the point where I was actually writing the section on the bronze lady in my book, Ghost of Sleepy Hollow. And then I saw him kind of come through the wall, and I'm like, no, you're not allowed here. And so he went back into wherever he went. And then the following day, there was a fire that destroyed my apartment. And there was water damage. So I lost all my research. So years and years of research was lost in the fire. But it was actually not a fire that destroyed my apartment. It was the water from the apartment. Water damage. And it destroyed everything. And so as I was kind of, the following day it was actually a couple of days. So all the water was drained from my apartment. What was remaining was moldy and wet and disgusting. And they were like, you have to evacuate and get all your stuff out. So there was no electricity in the apartment. And then he appears again on my wall. Almost what I thought at the time was he was taking credit for the fire, but I think he was letting me know he was trying to warn me. So yeah, that was the last time I saw him.
Wow.
Yeah.
How do you're talking about your research and your writing, and you're dealing with this, clairvoyance. How do you separate your mediumship from your writing and not bring all of that into it? Or do you want to bring all of that into it? Like, what's the difference between being an historian and a clairvoyant when you're trying to write these books?
It's really hard. I mean, like, so you kind of tapped on the topic that really has been frustrating for me. So I worked as a journalist for many years. I would say I'm more of a paranormal journalist as opposed to a historian. My dad was a history teacher, so I did grow up in that environment. This is my stepdad that was a history teacher. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so it's really hard to kind of like walk the line. I did kind of know stuff that other people didn't know as a journalist. In fact, I kind of used my abilities along the way secretly. So I was in the crystal closet, which is what I call it, for many years. But when I started writing paranormal themed books, it started to reveal itself, and it actually became an asset out in the field doing paranormal research. So there's a fine line. When I write my books, a lot of times I'll even get reviews. They're like, how does he know that? And I'm like, because I use my gifts as a clairvoyant to get the stories that often aren't told, and then I back it up with historical research. So if we have things that kind of work together, and I have a lot of those, like those situations that are not covered and not talked about, and I'm able to kind of uncover them using my abilities.
That's actually very similar to how I document. I use, spirit boxes and other means to document areas. And then after a while, I look up the history and see if what I've been documenting matches the history. And, more often than not, it does.
Do you have
awesome.
Do you have any specifics, Sam, in any of your books where there was like a reinforcement or even a contradiction with like what you were experiencing as a clairvoyant versus what the history and the lore was you were researching?
I mean, pretty much every book has at least one situation where that happens. A good example for me is Concord's Colonial End. And so in addition to, I'm an immersion journalist, so I like to actually put myself in the location for months, sometimes years, while I'm writing the book. So I was working at Concord's Colonial End. I worked the overnight shift, and I actually wrote a book. I have it right over here. Ghost that Conquers Colonial Inn, and and it's supposedly one of the most haunted inns in the country. And I so I was working on that book, and the whole thing is Room 24 was a makeshift hospital during the Battle of Lexington and Concord, and I did, I actually had experiences in that room, but it felt kind of off to me. And it turns out that that room was actually not built in 1775. So it didn't serve as a makeshift hospital. So yeah, it was kind of like me telling the truth. And I think it doesn't fit in with the lore that's always associated with that inn. And so I had to basically break the news. Hey, this actually was not built, and the 1700s, so there's no way this could have served as a makeshift hospital. And truthfully, and another great example is George's Island, one of the first locations that I visited and had an experience. There's a lady in black that's been reported for many years at George's Island, and there's a whole story that Melanie Lanier, she was a Confederate wife. Her husband was in prison on the island, and she was hanged on the island for trying to rescue her husband, break him out of prison. Well, the truth is she never existed. So things like that, I tend to debunk actually folklore or stories that people think are facts.
Can I ask you guys? I put this question on both of you guys. Why? Because I just feel like I see this, and this is something that I've noticed. Why are all the lady ghosts in white or black? Do they have no other colors that they can choose from? Like, what is that? Is this like just because of how we're seeing it? What is the mission on this, or like what is the reasoning behind this? It's always the lady in white or the lady in black, and it's never like, the woman in red, or like, she's wearing like a lavender. I mean, what's the deal?
Well, I mean, like Salem, there's a lady in blue, so there are different colors. But I actually talk a lot about that in Ghost of Sleepy Hollow. So I use Sleepy Hollow as a way to it's almost like a feminist manifesto. And I talked to Leanna Renee Heber, who wrote a book called A Haunted History of Invisible Women, and my friend Alex Matsuo, who wrote a book on women in the paranormal. So I actually feel like it's sort of they don't have a name, so it's almost like marginalizing women in history, and it's also kind of taking away their identity. So the lady in white, the lady in blue, the lady in black, it's symbolic for certain things. So usually the lady in white is someone wearing a wedding gown, for example, or the lady in black is someone in mourning. But the colors are significant. But again, I think it's a way to control the narrative, specifically of women.
I like that answer.
That's an interesting take on it.
Because history
and
do that,
it's
right?
funny because I have a couple of theories on what it could be, but perception is a big one. And one thing that humans like to do, we do like to simplify things, and that falls along the lines of what Sam's saying, and
Well, sure. I
unfortunately
mean,
details are lost. And it also could be that most general normal people, when they see these apparitions, these spirits, their perception only allows them to see a woman in white, a woman in black, again, and going back into Sam what was saying that's quite possibly the reason.
well, look, man, men have been holding down women for how long now, right? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
It's like from just the witch trials themselves in Salem to everything else. I mean, of course, why not just break it down and make it even more? It's a really interesting take on all of that.
Yeah.
Sam, in your studies, when you're doing your research, I also like to talk about this a lot because, and I'll show you. I don't know how familiar you are with what John does, and if you've had a chance to look at his stuff, and we'll play some because we're about to get into trying to make this transition into the Sleepy Hollow talk here. But it's like John uses a lot of tech is a big part of the paranormal investigative world these days, and I'm just curious, sort of, what your methods are when you go into into that side of when you're wearing that hat. How much do you rely on like EMF or EVPs or thermal cameras or spirit boxes versus your own, clairvoyance? What do or is it a help? Is it a hindrance? Is it horse shit? Like, where do you fall on the tech spectrum and where tech is going, in this study, in this space?
So I personally like tech because it validates with what I'm picking up. And I like to work in tandem. So a lot of times, especially if I'm doing a show, I'll be brought into a location like House of Between Two or Curse of Lizzie Borden. I'll be brought in to do what's called a psychic sweep. So I'll actually read the location, and then the investigators come in and they pick up like EVPs or spirit box or whatever, and they actually validate what I pick up. Or so it works in tandem. So I do actually love working with the tech side because it validates with what I'm getting. I also like to work with other mediums, which is not the norm. A lot of times mediums don't like to work together. But I like it for validation. And I'll be honest with you, I have a lot of self-doubt sometimes. So I'll go in and really question what I'm picking up, especially if it's something that, for House in Between Two, I picked up that there was a lynching on the property. And that doesn't, there's no, I mean, I didn't even know where I was going. They dropped me off. They're like, you can't use your dowsing rods. And so I'm out there. I'm like, this is what I'm picking up. And it was terrifying for me to say that on camera. But I was right. There was a lynching on the property. And so I guess for me, it's just more validation. It also helps when I have self-doubt with my abilities.
What are dowsing rods?
Oh, so I actually have a pair just kind of sitting on the side. So dowsing rods are witch sticks. I use them a lot in Salem, but they were kind of designed to look for water sources. But mediums use it. A lot paranormal investigators use them a lot for yes or no answers. But you can tweak it to kind of like, if you want it to point in a direction, say, where do you want me to go? And it'll point in the direction where you want to go. I use it to kind of say yes or no. Are there any spirits in the room? And then it'll cross it saying no right now, which is good because I'm in my apartment.
Right.
But for me, they're copper. I use them ones that are charged, and I usually have my first pair actually were charged by a high priestess witch. So I work a lot with witches, especially in Salem, because I feel like that they keep the dark energies away, so I can focus in on more of the lingering spirits that I want to communicate with.
Got it. I love that you held those up. I had no idea what those were. I think that I've only seen something like that in like a Bugs Bunny cartoon where they're pointing hangers at like looking for things. But you know what I love about it? It's like, because we get this a lot, and John, and I'm gonna show you a video in a second. John uses he uses iPhone apps these days primarily as he does his cemetery walks or he goes into haunted locations. And there's a lot of controversy about the apps, right? And let me make no mistake, we're not oblivious to the controversy or the fact that these things might be programmed in a certain way.
Right.
What, as someone new to this, and when I look at it, is it's like, because I have those apps on my phone, but I don't get the same response that John gets when he's out there at all. I get the standard thing that probably everybody gets, like, leave here, no, run away. Like, that's probably, this guy's getting like some specific names. He's getting real Q&A. He's getting personalities in specific locations, and his location geo-tracking is off. So it's like, he's like, oh, if we go there, this ghost always makes fun of me. And sure enough, the ghost is calling him an asshole every time we walk in that room through the bar. That doesn't happen, and it's like, so there's a long story, but it's like, when I look at that, do you feel that those rods, the witch, I love calling them witch sticks. What a great name. The witch, do you feel that that's more about you?
It is.
Than it is the stick, it's not the stick, it's the tool, right? Like, I look at the apps as a tool, and that's a tool, but it's like, if I bought those, I'd hold it around. I'd probably look like an idiot. And it's like, no, it's not going to do anything. I in my belief. But I bet I would argue that if John held it too, it might work.
The only reason why I never use dowsing rods, and I say this in my live streams all the time, is the simple fact that my hands have serious injuries.
Right.
Tendons, ligaments, nerves. If I held them, they'd be shaking. They'd be, it'd be my afflictions that are causing them to move, not, I wouldn't be able to use the tool properly.
Right.
Yeah.
But I guess the long question is, how do you feel about these types of divination tools? Is there anything that you have a go-to with other than those, or that you use, or like in respect to controversy around it? that question makes sense. Might be a
Yeah.
long-winded way to say it.
Yeah, so I totally 100% agree with you on dowsing rods. I think when I first started, I would actually use them on my tours in Salem, and so I think people it was under the impression that the spirits were moving at them, but I feel like that I'm using them to tap into my abilities. So it's almost like the validation that I was talking about earlier. It's sort of like a quick validation of what I'm picking up. Because sometimes for me as a clairvoyant, it's not obvious, and I need something to kind of like say yes or no. Like is that is like are you are you a male? And it'll say yes. So it's me kind of like validating myself. As far as other tools, I did a workshop, or not a workshop, but a panel where I moderated, so other people use different divination tools like scrying. I've used Black Mirror scrying before. I've also have done. I'm not a big spirit board person personally, because I have seen those stories go awry. People use spirit boards and they just kind of like all hell breaks loose. So I kind of stay away from spirit boards. However, I really think it's your intention. If you have intentions to summon a demon, you're going to summon a demon. But I personally don't use spirit boards. But scrying works for me, and scrying could be in a fire. It can be a crystal ball. It could be a black mirror. I actually use black mirror scrying a lot. And that's a way where you kind of focus on the mirror and you can kind of, again, use your clairvoyance to have a story unfold.
Use an obsidian black mirror.
Yeah, I use
Yeah,
I
nice.
mean, I do have an obsidian black mirror, but I had one that was made by my friend Lisa. So I like when people make things for me, because to me it's more authentic. And it was kind of like done from a mirror she got at the Dollar Tree. So it doesn't have to be this fancy thing to be able to get what you need done.
Well, that's wild. That is okay, but again, it's really about an extension of you. Because see, look, John makes fun of me all the time because I think he's some sort of like a tech medium. That's my personal belief. He would say his joke is he's not a medium, he's an extra double XL. But it's like that's the bit, that's the dad joke bit that he's been running with. But it's sort of like I don't know how else to explain it. So, I think we could probably have a whole separate conversation on how you teach mediums, because I want to put this guy to the test one of these days about through all of this. But let's move on to Sleepy Hollow in particular, because John and I are both from Westchester County, so Sleepy Hollow is a big part of our life. And what I loved in your book too is that, and it never really occurred to me, but so genius is that the Headless Horseman really is probably they're the first true American monster.
Yes.
Right. And it's sort of fascinating.
100%.
You know,
100%.
and it's like, when I think the Headless Horseman, my headless horseman is the Disney one, right? Like that's
Ichabod Crane.
right. Like that's where that's the whole thing. So John goes there all the time. I'm going to show you a quick video, just something like where John, using his spirit box, is walking around. You probably will recognize this place. So let me jump into it. Hopefully, sometimes it takes us a little walk, but here's a little video. Now, look, again, it's a door, like at the door, open, these sort of words, randomized, maybe they are, but why then, why now, right when he's knocking at a door? It just seems this app ain't that sophisticated, man. If they were, these guys who created it would have created Google. You know what I mean? It's just like there's something, you know what I mean? It's just not, it's another level to me the kind of response that he would get from it. Do you recognize that at all? That cemetery, Sam?
I mean,
It's been a while.
is that Sleepy Hollow Cemetery? Because like truthfully, like that, like it's so Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. I mean, I don't remember going to that specific mausoleum or crypt. It does kind of remind me of the Dark Shadows crypt that was used. I mean, is there a specific crypt to it
So,
from the cemetery?
Sam, that's right by that horseshoe of mausoleums, right
Okay.
before you get to what they consider the Dutch cemetery. The
Okay.
Dutch graveyard. That's so right where Washington Irving is buried and his whole family. So that's literally right before that. So if I would have turned, so my back is basically facing the old Dutch church.
Okay. Yeah, so that is right next to Washington Irving's crypt. And so yeah, I spend many afternoons and evenings. You're not supposed to be there in the nighttime, so I'll say it was many afternoons in the cemetery.
Right. And look, so Sleepy Hollow, right? It's been romanticized, obviously, in a big way, thanks to Washington Irving, but you obviously in the book dive into a darker, some of the lesser known haunts. What did you uncover that most people don't know about the areas, the ghostly history of that area? What did you find most fascinating that you were excited to reveal?
So, having written so many books on Salem, first of all, like writing Ghost of Sleepy Hollow was so much fun, and so it was in Salem, I felt so much guilt associated with the Salem witch trials. And Sleepy Hollow, I didn't because these are characters that were fictional. So a lot of the ghosts were based on fictional stories that were and some legends that were told to Washington Irving. So for me, it was a nice departure from the darker material that I'm used to. However, it doesn't mean that Sleepy Hollow isn't any less haunted. But so as far as the story, I started with the Legend of Sleepy Hollow and really focused on the different stories that were mentioned throughout the text, throughout the short story. And kind of looked into those, and so my first, my whole reason why I chose Sleepy Hollow is because I lived in New York City for many years, and Sleepy Hollow was my Salem. So it was just a way for me an excuse to kind of go back to the area that I love, especially around Halloween time. I love it. I love it in October.
Mhm.
And so as far as the locations and the stories, I took first of all, like there have been reports of a headless horseman ghost, and so looking at where that came from and why would there be a manifestation, especially since Washington Irving wrote the story when he was in England. So you guys both know that there was a Battle of White Plains where there was a decapitated soldier. So there was a real headless man or headless horseman that perhaps he did base the tale on, but we're not 100% sure about that. It may have inspired him, but it's almost like an amalgam of different stories to tell the story. So I looked at what he kind of talked about, and why are people still having sightings of the headless horseman even 200 years later? And it's, of course, it was after the book came out in the early 1800s, or the short story came out in the 1800s. There were multiple reports, and they kind of diminished over time. But I strongly feel they're what I call thought form manifestations or egregores. And so
I was just about to ask you about it. You stole one of my questions. Yeah, go ahead. Tell us. That was my next question, because I love this word and I love this concept of manifestations. Go ahead.
And so for me, Sleepy Hollow is full of egregores and thought forms, and the culprit is Washington Irving. He kind of created them, and so an idea of a thought form, and it goes back to the Phillips experiment. I mean, it's been around forever, but that idea that you can create a ghost or create a manifestation, and the perfect location to do that is Sleepy Hollow, especially with a story as rich as the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. So I think a lot of what's going on in Sleepy Hollow is either egregores or thought forms, or other spirits assuming the roles of these characters to kind of give them life, if you will. But I do feel like that the activity, some of it has been conjured.
So it's like, John, I mean, to me, it sounds like, as opposed to like a poltergeist, by definition, right, is like sort of like the energy from one person's manifestation, right? It's from a living person creating
Right.
this thing.
Right.
Whereas an egregore would be the mob creation of an entity.
And
Right? Does that make sense? Is that way to can I just dumb down what you said? Is that one way to do it?
it is, and especially when you have a story as popular. So when you're going to Sleepy Hollow expecting to have an encounter with the Headless Horseman, you probably will. Also tours. I mean, we have in Salem, we have a lot of egregores and thought forms in Salem too, like the Lady in Blue. And we tell this story over and over again, but the thing is, she never existed. And so the Lady in Blue has been created. There's photos of the Lady in Blue, and so same with Sleepy Hollow. We have stories like Hulda the Witch. Hulda the Witch was I kind of talked about, and there's a kind of one line that could be Hulda the Witch in the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, but then it was reinforced in Edward Mayhew Bacon's book in the late 1800s about creating this whole character, this woman who was a witch. She lived in the outskirts of Sleepy Hollow, kind of outside of the Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. And she, during the American Revolution, she fought for her lands and basically turned into Xena the Warrior Princess. And so what's interesting is people have reported having experiences with Hulda the Witch. There's a gravestone in her honor, and she was a created person. She never existed.
You know what's
wait a
wild?
minute, wait, John. You're telling me there's a gravestone for somebody there? There's no body in it.
Yes.
Is what you're saying?
No, that's 100% accurate. Yes.
Oh wow.
Yes. So listen, my followers will hound me if I do not bring this up.
Okay.
I document a place called Buckout, New York.
Oh yeah.
Okay. And in my documentation, the spirits speak of an entity called the Doulahan. They will say the Doulahan. And in doing research about the Doulahan, it's created many ways, but one way this entity is created is by losing its head in battle. And Buckout Road, those woods are right near where the battle, I think it was October 26th or 28th, 1776, the Battle of White Plains, which is what's referenced in the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. And I believe there's a line in the actual Legend of Sleepy Hollow where he says that, the rider rides back to the place where he lost his head. And that would be the woods of Buckout. And in my documentation, I come across them speaking of the headless rider, the headless mercenary, and they say the Doulahan. And it's terrifying. And I don't get scared of things. That's like one thing about me. I don't get scared, but that resonates, as Gary said, us being from Westchester, growing up with that Legend of Sleepy Hollow, that resonates with me. And it's a terrifying thing to think about, that I'll be sitting at Buckout and then all of a sudden I'm gonna see the Headless Horseman,
And Sam, Buckout Road is also known for, like, it's got years and years of horrific tragedy, from from dealing with the treatment from slaves to the a woman killing her kids, the legend of that, or the Buckout family murders and everything. Like, you'll
Mary
see
Buckout, Albert
Mary
Fish, the
Buckout.
albino cannibals. I mean, we can go on and on.
So many legends, and she's isn't there another lady in white over there too?
Yeah,
John?
that's Mary Buckout, who
Right.
Last 3 sessions ago at Buckout, she actually came through, which was wild. And then last night, when I was at Buckout last night, they were speaking about her saying, how she hung herself. And that's pretty wild. But yeah, the whole Doulahan, Headless Horseman, Buckout is just, it's insane to hear that. First time I heard it, I freaked out. I had no idea what they were talking about. I was just like, what is going on? So it's just, and reading your book, which I read, I just figured you'd like to hear about the Doulahan and
Oh, I
more
love it.
rooted legends.
Yeah, I went to the location at the Battle of White Plains, so it is right by the road. Have I explored the road like you have? No, I haven't. But and I actually also did a lot of research. So this conversation kind of turned me on to the legend and lore associated with. I think it's like a mile and a half strip, right? So it's like not a very long road.
About 2 miles. Yeah.
And so I haven't gone like so close to the location. I will tell you, like I felt, and there have been reports of the Headless Horseman over there, and I'm like, why would there be reports over there and not Sleepy Hollow if it's in fact the thought form manifestation? So I so you said a Doulahan?
Doulahan.
Okay,
Doulahan.
I have to
But it
look this
could be
up.
both, Sam, because what you're saying makes perfect sense. It could be both. It could be the same manifestation just brought out differently,
Right.
through everyone's intent, because mainly that whole, thought form and all that, that's intent. The same thing that I use to protect myself when I go to these places. The same way, other people use their gifts and whatnot. It could very well be intent. It wouldn't surprise me one bit.
So, well, that's it. So I always thought like Sleepy Hollow or North Tarrytown, as you probably both remember it as, that whole area. So even in my book, I kind of go outside. So I go into like Irvington, like what the Sunnyside is. So it's not just Sleepy Hollow. But for me, like the woods between Tarrytown, North Tarrytown, and White Plains, it's so haunted. Like that whole area.
So haunted. Sam, real quick. I loved the part of the book about the Tarrytown estate.
Right.
That is another place that I've been documenting. I've been documenting it for about a year and a half now, and that's a wild place. Definitely, as far as hauntings go, a very overlooked place and not popular. And another very haunted spot. When I was reading your book, I was very excited that you brought that place up. My followers know it as the Cottage because I stay in the cottage next to Mary Duke's garden, statue garden.
Do you stay in the Biddle Mansion, or where do you stay on the estate?
So I stay on the cottage. That's usually where I stay because right now I'm focusing my documentation at the gardens.
Okay.
And I am going to be expanding soon and going to be staying at the estate. And I'm also working out something with the Goose Feather once it closes, where I can, also document at the Goose Feather.
Now, well, tell all of us who all these words that you're saying that sounds like we're in Middle Earth for a second. Why don't you tell all of us who don't understand, like, what are some of the things that you've experienced, both of you, Sam, like in these areas that maybe that that match up, that are in line?
Yeah, so I always stay at the Tarrytown House estate. So there's the King Mansion, which is where Goose Feather, he was referring to the restaurant. It's a Asian fusion restaurant. That's amazing, by the way. That's in this beautiful white mansion. And there's supposedly a woman, a lady in white there as well. But she has a name. Her name's Sybil, and she was Sybil King, I think is her name. And
the tobacco Mongols, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So she's sort of the ghost haunting that location, but this whole there's multiple rooms and multiple wings to it, and then there's like where you go for breakfast. There's the Biddle Mansion, and that's what John's talking about. So there's another mansion on the same property that to me is the most haunted. It's even more haunted than the King Mansion, in my opinion.
Where I stay is right across from the Biddle Mansion.
Oh wow!
So because that's right near where the gardens is. There's this little. It's the new. I believe it's the newest part of the entire estate. It was It's all stone. It's a stone cottage that was erected in 1930, and all the stones came out of the Hudson River to build this place. And
wow.
I've always just been. I love it. It's just like one of those things where that's where I have to stay. But interesting enough, what I've documented there so far, I can only describe as a succubus type entity. And when it first came through, I mean, this thing is wild. But when it first,
you and I are working on the same stuff, kind of like this is really you're hitting on stuff that I've also have hit on too.
That's so awesome.
Oh yeah, this go I've seen
yeah.
on his. So you got to understand, Sam. So John is primarily a live influencer. Like the video I showed you, that comes after. So he'll go live. Like this is his full time job. He'll be out there 6 to 8 hours a day in various locations live, and just streaming, talking to his community with a spirit box, and he catches stuff right as he's documenting, walking around, talking. So when he's at this place, this ghost, does it have a name? Wasn't it Lilith or something similar? That's the name you were given?
So and I sighed when it called itself Lilith, because then
Oh
the
my gosh.
implications. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think this thing was just messing with me,
Yeah, I think so
but
too.
it called itself Lilith. This
Yeah.
thing hits on me relentlessly,
And
says the
it's hysterical.
nastiest stuff. And when it first started happening, I didn't understand why this thing was here when I
Mhm.
first started documenting, until I realized just the amount of weddings and parties and the nightlife there. I mean, the open bars outside from the Goose Feather, and like people are just partying. And there's a lot of sexual energy when it comes to partying. So
Wait,
So
what you guys both shared like a sign, a look when the name Lilith came up. What does that mean? Does that mean something to anybody? That
yeah, I mean,
why
so
is that?
Lilith is sort of like the goddess of the underworld. So she's a symbol in witchcraft, and it's not. I mean, a lot of my friends are witches, so I'm actually not. Just the idea that it's presenting itself as Lilith, almost like the Queen of Demons, almost.
yeah.
And so I personally. So can I just tell you my experience there? And
Would
Yes.
love to
a
hear
lot.
it. Would love to hear it.
Okay, so I kind of getting back to the Bronze Lady. I stayed there many nights, and I woke up at 3 o'clock. I heard what sounded like a fake crying, like kind of like manufactured crying. So it was like and I'm like, what the hell is that? And then I go outside because my place I wasn't staying in the cottage. I was staying actually right near the Biddle Mansion. I go outside and I see a woman almost like with big kind of like black hair running up the hill toward me, and like she's gonna hurt me, and she was wearing like a nightgown, and it kind of looked like dark shadows, like almost like a vampire type woman running after me, and so I always assumed that it was me pissing off the Bronze Lady from earlier that day. But I will never forget that it was woman. She was kind of coming after me, and she was kind of sexualized. So when you said succubus, I'm like, oh shit, okay,
Yeah.
yeah,
And so I want to
That's
just touch
wild.
on something that you just said. When you said that cry, that cry, I
yeah.
picked that up. I picked that up. And the last time I was actually at the cottage, there was something that was crying that way. And I'm like, I'm like, wait a minute, is Lilith now attacking these spirits? Because I've even documented Lilith controlling some of the female and male entities there, some of the spirits.
It'd be
This is
wild.
why I work with people like you, because like this kind of like collaboration is because I'm like, why is she crying like that? And so like having someone else that has that and that's been like on video, it just validates with what I picked up, because I was by myself in my room and there was no one in there to chronicle that. So I'm grateful that you have that.
Part of me hates the fact that you have it because it makes all of this that much more real in a really terrifying way. That gives me chills. Like, it
I
really
knew
does.
that we were going to, just the way you described the estate in your book. I
Yeah.
knew that this was going to be one of my favorite parts of this whole conversation, and that's just so awesome. It's a place that nobody knows about. Like when you really think about it, when you think of haunted places, yeah, sure, you think of Sleepy Hollow, but you don't think of the Terrytown Estate. Again, it's one of those lesser known spots that you brought it up in your book, which is incredible.
It's Sam, you mentioned, you talk about spiritual vortexes
Right.
in Salem. Do you believe Sleepy Hollow has that, or is it more of the egregore?
So that location, Terrytown House Estate, to me, because it's really close to Sunnyside. So if you go, and so when you read my book, the journey, the book starts me trying to walk from Terrytown House Estate to Sunnyside, and on Google it looked like it was walkable, but it really wasn't walkable. So it's on Halloween night. I'm walking down this path called Sunnyside Lane. Cars are darting by me. I go into the back entrance in the woods behind Sunnyside, and I started hearing what sounded like a horse, and I saw these men wearing kind of like druid-like cloaks in the woods, and I'm like, oh my god, I thought I walked into like a time slip, and I went back in time to, and so it turned out they were actors with this recreation that was happening at Sunnyside, but that
That's
whole area
amazing.
has a vortex. So I was almost like going in and like back in time almost when I was walking down that path.
Supposedly, I don't know how true this is, but I've heard from locals because growing up in the area, people live around there. There supposedly is a cemetery. There's another lesser known cemetery in those woods somewhere that's
Mhm.
abandoned. And people just hanging out, being teenagers back in the day, they whether they were under the influence of something while they were hanging out there, who knows. But they've reported that that cemetery is like super haunted. And that's one of the things I want to do is explore that whole area, see if I can find that hidden gem of a cemetery that people haven't stepped foot on in forever.
And Sam, you should know, like for John, his claim to fame, like the reason he's got 1 million followers on TikTok is, and I believe this to be true. He is one of the first people to start really walking through cemeteries with a spirit box. And a lot of people, even that I've investigated, and we're some real credible people, are like, there's no spirits at cemeteries for whatever reason. And John has been doing this and building up a family, some documentation and evidence, and his fans love it. He also cleans old headstones, which is like he's as far as I know the only person who does it. If there's anybody else that does it, he did it first. So he goes, and then that's where he has a lot of his conversations while he's cleaning headstones. And some of them will be like, cleaning my grave, thank you. Or they're like, get lost,
I even had one of the the video wasn't that popular, but one of the most recent videos that I put out was, straight from my live stream. I got done doing I do headstones in stages. I let it dry. If I need to hit it again, I will. Most of the time, I don't like to. I hit it once and, wait for it to dry, see if it's legible. If it's legible, I've done my job, that's it. I'm waiting for it to dry, and a spirit comes through the spirit box clear and says, did I miss the cleaning? Almost like, like an audience, like spirits at the cemetery, watching me clean these headstones. So it's wild when that happens.
Yeah, so
And
I'm in this school, so I got my start in like going to cemetery. So a lot of paranormal investigators, like they'll come with, like, if they're passionate about investigating, they start in cemeteries. Whoever says that their spirits are not in cemeteries, I mean, I think that a lot of times that the spirits that are there are either darker energies that are preying on people like us. They want to like attach to us, or so I think darker energies hang out in cemeteries, and not necessarily the ones that are tricksters. So ones that are going to mess with you, or spirits that were visiting their loved ones at the cemetery. So I think that's the case as well. So I think that
I listen. Recently, I got knocked on my ass bad. 4 years I've been walking through cemeteries on social media, knocked on my ass bad.
it was pretty
Like,
funny,
really
Sam. I'm
bad.
not gonna lie. It was a
And
good pratfall too, but
yeah. And then one thing that I always warn everybody of is when you're at a cemetery and you're visiting your loved ones, do not run a spirit box. You do not know what is going to come through and try to pretend to be that loved one. And because you're in a place of grief and you hear things that might spark some hope, and that can end up very dangerous.
Well, what I really like too, John, about what Sam said is something we've been talking about, because it was when John first told me his theory, it was like the fractured memories of the living. And I'm like, well, as far as, and other people mentioned this to me too, but it's like, as far as I could tell, nobody remembers their grave site. That's not a place you would remember. But when you're talking about, it's the spirit of the people visiting their loved ones, and then
Which I
those
get a lot.
memories, right? Those
Which I
memories,
get a lot.
right? And the memories of
Yeah.
then those memories could be attached to them, attached to that there. That starts to make a lot of sense.
When I'm cleaning the headstone,
if that's what if that's what it is, if this is what it is, that could make a lot of sense.
when I'm cleaning the headstone of a 3-month-old little girl, she's not going to say thank you for that.
Right.
It's always an adult spirit, saying thank you for doing that, or thank you for, or they even sometimes say, that's my daughter, that's my son. So yeah, a lot of spirits that are there are not, they're visiting.
And Sam, John sticks to these, like in New York too. There's a lot of older sections of the cemetery. These are like Revolutionary War, Civil War era gravestones, and which is, you obviously you say a lot, and you've said a lot in a lot of your interviews that I've listened to and read. How history and haunting are intertwined.
Mm-hmm.
And is it like, where are some of those? Do you have any of those moments that were especially eerie or emotional for you in investigation with history and haunting, as any of your books, Sleepy Hollow or anywhere else?
Truer words, Sam. Truer words. That those words that you say in your, that is the truth. I stick by that too. So.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like a lot of every book is sort of like a new adventure. So like those stories always emerge in pretty much every book that I've written. I have written a book on haunted cemeteries, and to me, like a lot of the haunted cemeteries were very profound. But there was some in Plymouth, Massachusetts. So there's the cemetery there that's right by the square. So there's a lot of Native American. That was actually where the first pilgrim house was built. So like that, so it's a really important piece of land. But I actually was encountering a young man who passed away. He got hit by lightning in the cemetery, and I started picking him up as a clairvoyant. And oddly, his mother was in the cemetery while I was there going on the tour, and we started talking about him. And so like the stuff that you expect, it turns into something else. And I almost did a gallery reading for this woman with her son who was his spirit was coming through in the cemetery.
Cool.
That is pretty wild.
Yeah,
absolutely.
How did she feel about that?
She said I was nailing it, and I'm like, why am I? I mean, yeah. So you get a lot of historical stories that happen. But you get stuff that's more modern as well. So the fact that I was able to, his name's Wolf, like that's what he went by. And he almost kind of shamanic in his approach, but he was a young man, so he was in his 20s. And I started just picking his energy up and finding feathers and all sorts of things like offerings from Wolf. And his mother was in the cemetery, oddly at the same time. And I was like doing like a impromptu gallery reading for her. And yeah, she was really grateful that I was able to communicate with him and tell her his story. And then he's still there. He's still there because he's in a good way. So he's almost like the protector of the land.
And what's cool about that is it's so personal.
Yeah.
That's such a personal experience. And as you said, there's a big history there.
Right.
But now here's this more modern micro history of this man, and his mother's there. Just that I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah. And so those to me are the ones that I remember the most. But yeah, like especially with the American Revolution, this is kind of funny, but I was following Benjamin Franklin, so I was trying to find Benjamin Franklin's ghost. So I went to all the locations associated with Benjamin Franklin. Then I go, and this is from in my book, the Ghost of the American Revolution. And so I go to what was the foundation of Benjamin Franklin's house. And I was looking, there was like this underground privy, and I'm like, oh, what's that? And I heard behind me this voice say, that's where George Washington took a dump. Like that's what, and I'm like, what? And I turned around, there was nobody there. And so if you know Benjamin Franklin, he had a potty mouth. So that was to me like I was looking for Benjamin Franklin all day.
Literally in this case.
I think I found him.
Wow. That
is amazing. And that's great too, because you know what that also shows me? That also speaks to this idea that, look, they were people.
Yeah. Yeah.
They made toilet humor.
Yeah.
It's like every guy thinks it's funny forever. I mean, it's just sort of the way it goes, right? Sam, this has been an unbelievable, you gave us an incredible amount of time. It's been unbelievably informative. You're a wealth of knowledge. And I want to, just before we tag off, I wonder if you were going to hear about what John's experience, what he's able to do, what would you say? What would be the first thing you would do with this guy to see if he's actually a medium of some kind? How should we test this guy out to see if he's a medium?
Well, here's the
or
thing.
Something.
Yeah. So I'm a strong believer with mediumship that it's like a muscle that you have to work. So as far as like testing, John, that's a lot of pressure. I've been put under that. I've been vetted myself where they're like, oh, if you're a real medium, you should like, what's my name? I'm horrible with names. So so I would expect John, to be able to pick it up. I think for me, just um, trusting that everybody has those abilities and you can tap into them and work that muscle. And it sounds like by doing your live streaming, you are tapping into that muscle. And so I believe you. We don't have to like vet you. I believe that you're tapping into something, John.
You think that's true? You think everyone has this ability?
I think that people have it. Some have it more intense than others. I think women are more intuitive naturally than men, but
I agree.
I do feel like
100%.
that's some men, especially if you have like Native American, like the whole Native American lineage. Everyone says that, but that does kind of come true. People have ties to Native Americans, but I feel like that we all have some abilities. Whether or not you choose to listen to them is up to you.
I always say about women, just on a scientific level, they're more biologically advanced than us men.
Right.
They really are.
Right.
So there's a lot more women that have these abilities. I personally don't think I have any abilities. I think it's more in my methodology. I think it's more in how I logically analyze each situation. What causes me to pick what headstones and go to what spots? I just do it. There's no thought. It's like, I look at it like it's more randomized. Maybe it's not, you know.
So that's a form of mediumship, and like again, everybody's different levels. I'm advanced, obviously, but I feel like that I like to work with people like you because I really feel like you validate with what I'm picking up, and
Yeah.
so that's even though you're not a medium per se, but you're it works well with what I do.
I like to call myself a paranature documenter is what I like to
That
call it.
works.
Right? It is. It's a great. I like the word
Sam,
paranature a lot, by the way.
Listen, your work at Sleepy Hollow, especially with the Terrytown estate, is awesome. The fact
Oh,
that
thank you.
you've had experiences there that are similar to the things that I pick up, and we didn't know each other before this. We
I
didn't know
know.
that, either of us existed.
Right.
That's the beauty part of it. Like, I think that's wild, and I think it's very interesting.
Sam,
And to
what's
be
next? Sam,
explored.
what's next for you? What are you working on now? What's your next project?
Well, I just want to add, like, I think
sorry.
the spirits bring people like us together for a reason.
Yeah.
And so I do want to go to the cottage at the Terrytown House to stay with you and to confront Lilith. I want to know about this woman.
That would be, I'd love that. That'd be phenomenal.
So
That'd be so fun.
I have a couple of things that I'm working on currently. I'm working on a book called Haunted Castles of New England. People were like, there are castles in New England. Yes, there are castles in New England. So that's been a lot of fun. I'm actually going to be working on a book on haunted castles of New York probably next year. So I'll probably be in your neck of the woods, John, to be able to go to some of the castles like Lyndhurst Castle and other castles, Bannerman Castle in the Hudson Valley. I also curated an anthology called the Haunted Travels Anthology, and that's coming out on Friday the 13th in June. So that's a collection of up and coming writers and some established writers, and we went all over the country chronicling similar stories to like you experienced in Sleepy Hollow, and looking for stories for next volume, which is coming out next year. So maybe you could do a story on your experience in Buck Out the Road, or also at Terrytown House Estate.
Yeah, sure, of course. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
You have to sit down and actually focus, John, and write out a story that's like,
I know.
you have to
My
find a minute
ADHD
in your day
cannot get me.
and like get your ADD and get your ass straight down and start typing out your life's work. You know what I mean? That's a whole other thing. It's like, but the stories are great. Sam, thank you so much for really honoring us with your presence on this as we build this project up, and really
thank you. Amazing.
It's amazing. I mean, there's something wild there's something going on. We had Dan Sturgis on. His episode drops next week. He's a paranormal investigator out of New York, And he brought up this point that I thought was so wonderful, which was, it's like it really in the scheme of the world, we just figured out what lightning was when we created high-speed cameras, which is not that long ago, to see how it actually formed. So it's like there's so much we don't know, and we're just not there yet. You know what I mean? In terms of what we're doing. But getting different perspective of people who are on the ground, who are doing it, who are writing it, who are experiencing it, finding those things that corroborate each other's stories. It freaks me out a lot. I'm not gonna lie, it really does. But it's very fun, and it's very interesting to see what that all means and where it could potentially be going as technology advances or these kind of studies advance. So your contribution to it and to this whole genre is unbelievably helpful and wonderful to read and follow. So again, Sam, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank
Really,
you.
thank you.
For having me on. And there are no accidents in the paranormal, so I felt like that we were meant to talk.
I like the way you think. I like the way you think. Sam,
Definitely.
I'll
Sam,
see
thank you
Take
again.
care. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Sam is gone. John, that was pretty wild.
Yeah, that was cool. He's awesome.
Smart.
You know?
He's got a real good perspective on things.
He also seems to be very unique as far as his view on the paranormal. It's very journalistic. And I know that's what he's done. He did for years, he said, but it's very journalistic. Like, I know he says he worries about mixing his clairvoyancy sometimes and whatnot, but that book the book he wrote about Sleepy Hollow was very journalistic. The whole conversation he had with us,
That's right.
I loved him. He was awesome.
And everybody, look, the book is called Ghosts of Sleepy Hollow, Haunts of the Headless Horseman by Sam Baltrusis. I'll have a link of this in my bio and in my link tree.
It's so good that my ADHD personality was able to go right through it.
It's the fastest book John's ever read. He hasn't read a book and learned that didn't have pictures in it for so long, but this had some good pictures and ones you might recognize even from John's lives if you go and see it. Listen, guys, thank you so much for listening to Splintered Spirits and for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. This has been another wonderful episode. Everybody, thank you so much. This has been Splintered Spirits. Until next time.
Oh, wait.